Something really interesting happens when it comes to Pesach. We start talking about freedom. Now, we're free because we're not slaves. Our ancestors were slaves, thereby they weren't free, but there is clearly something else we're trying to tap into, a certain notion of freedom on a deeper level that we're trying to extract from our experience and play itself out in the rest of our lives to make it meaningful. We're immersing ourselves in a narrative. And that's what we're doing during the Seder, but we're supposed to walk away freer men. And this is something Rav Hirsch does in what he calls the four toasts. And I really think that's a beautiful metaphor to illustrate what we're doing at the Seder. There are 4 cups of wine that we all know, and they all illustrate a different point. For Rav Hirsch, he looks at them as being a ladder, not a Jewish ladder, a universal ladder of meaning, a structure, architecture of meaning that we can input into our lives. And why is a toast the perfect metaphor? Because what do you do when you make a toast? You make an event meaningful. You choose the meaning to impart to the community, to people around you, and you impart meaning. And you do it in an act. That's what the Seder is. You're making an event meaningful communally through actions. Because another point Rav Hirsch really draws down, and we're going to be discussing Rav Hirsch's fourth essay, I apologize, the 4th essay in the collective writings on the month of Nisan. So, welcome back. I'm Simi Lerner, and this is the Judaism from Within podcast. So why a toast? Because that's what you're doing at the Seder. And Rav Hirsch points out that there's a certain bias we have, that we think that abstract truths in their most purest form are abstract. But the most important truths are truths that you can ground in your experience and impact your life. An abstract, like a philosophical bias we have in the West, that the best truths are the abstract ones. But no, the best truths are the ones that you can live in your life. And that's what the Seder night is doing. It's taking these lofty, spiritual, abstract ideas and grounding them in our experience. And we will do that now together with the 4 toasts. And really think about that phrase, to toast. Because what happens at a wedding? A person imparts specific meaning, communally, with an act. So we have 4 cups. Each one represents something different related to the Pesukim, that God took us out from the hardship. The second case relates to the slavery that he took us from. The third one refers to the redemption, and the 4th one refers to God taking us to him as his people. V'lakachti li la'am. And I will, after Ga'alti, I will take you to be my people. So how does Rav Hirsch break this down? The first toast, the extracting us from bondage. This is the pain, the suffering, the inui, the pain the Jewish people were under. And Rav Hirsch points out, which is interesting because it sort of goes against a certain Catholic mindset, that if you are in pain, if you are in suffering, there is no space for higher meaning. You can't breathe. You can't catch your breath. A man doesn't connect to God. A woman doesn't connect to the Almighty under immense suffering. Now, there's obviously meaning that can be extracted from suffering, but that only takes place once you've had pause. In a time in life where you are in constant activity, constant, in language of today's world, constant productivity, there is no space for spirituality. There is no space for higher meaning. There's a cognitive tunneling that takes place. The prefrontal cortex can't engage because there's no room to breathe. An 80-hour work week, sweating, there is no space for you to pause, to think, to reflect on those higher purposes of what it means to be a human, or as Rav Hirsch puts it, thoughts worthy of being human. We're not here to just produce. That is the notion of Shabbos. Now, why am I bringing Shabbos into this context? Because that's what Shabbos was. Shabbos is an opportunity for everybody, man, woman, slave, to be equalized in the ability to step back from work. People say Shabbos is a beautiful digital detox, but there's something true about that. What is Shabbos? Shabbos is a time where you're able to pause from your daily life. That is the opportunity for higher thinking, higher spiritual reflection. Now, that sounds cliche, obviously, but it's an important point that we often don't think about, sort of Maslow's pyramid of meaning. But this first level is a necessity. Without that, and the reason why I contrast this with the Catholic world, that there was a certain pride in suffering. Suffering meant something good. There was a certain, the clergy had money, had wealth, and the peasants had nothing. They suffered and they starved. And there wasn't anything wrong with that. That was like the place of the peasant. But no, the peasant is also worthy for higher meaning and higher purposes. Shabbos applies to the peasant and applies to the slave, it applies to the worker, and it applies to everybody. That first point, the first class, is a remembrance that meaning takes place, freedom takes place when you have room to think. The second place, God took us out of slavery from Egypt. Now this, Rav Hirsch points out, is an important point because you might not be suffering, but you can still be in a cage. You might no longer be tethered to a ship. You might not be held down, but you don't know where you're going. That notion of freedom in the first stage, the freedom not suffering, doesn't mean you're free. You could be, as they classically call it, a gold cage. The Rav Hirsch uses the example, a person can be showered and overflown with marzipan for some reason, must have been a popular delicacy in the time, but overflowed with luxury, materialism, and you're free in the sense that you're not suffering, but you're not free that you have self-determination. A recognition of freedom is an essential component to being free, not being a slave. But we can parallel this idea in many areas of our own lives, in terms of being a slave to multiple different distractions that we have in our lives that we have to extract ourselves from to be able to choose a direction. Freedom, in that most pure sense of the word, Bechira Chokshis, Rav Hirsch looks at as the Jewish people symbolizing and Egyptians symbolizing the absolute opposite. The caste system that was set in stone, the Nile, which was run like clockwork. Every aspect of the Egyptian life was set in stone, and that's the way it must be, versus how it could be from the Jewish standpoint. The Jewish people, as we spoke about before, were shepherds. There is a trust, there's an unknowability about being a shepherd, versus the agricultural life of the person living on the Nile. The sun was the god Ra, and that was, once again, like clockwork, nothing new under the sun. Rav Hirsch looks at this second, extracting us from slavery, as being not only extracting us from physical slavery in Egypt, but extracting us from that mentality, the mentality of the Egyptian. And Rav Hirsch looks at the mentality of the Egyptian of being one of pure determinism. The king was a god. You were in a caste. You were in a specific structure. The sun was to be worshipped. That cyclical reality was your god. The Nile, once again, like clockwork, kept the Nile going, irrigated your field. And versus this is the Jew, the nomad, the wanderer, the one who has to trust, the one who can choose. Rav Hirsch looks at the plagues as undermining this deterministic structure of the Egyptians. So you have our first stage. You are no longer suffering, you can breathe. The second stage, you recognize that you're a free, independent agent. With agency, you can choose your direction. But that is a danger still. It is still a danger to think that just because I am no longer suffering, and the next stage, I am no longer bound by a deterministic universe, then now I'm good. This is the interesting mistake of the Western world today. We think what freedom means is that no one's telling me what to do, that I'm just free, I can do anything. But that's where the seditious or the seductive idea lies. You think having no constraints means you're free. But that's not freedom in the noble sense of the word. It's freedom like a child. It's freedom the same way my 2-year-old is free. He can do whatever he wants, but that's not freedom in the refined sense of the word. Yes, you've broken your chains, but your chains are now metal on the ground. You haven't built a house. Freedom in its noble sense is not just waiting around to find meaning, because meaning will find you. This is where the idea that he develops, that if you have no structure to exist within, a structure will find you. If there is no structure that you have chosen voluntarily, a structure will find you. And that structure, what the way Rav Hirsch describes it, is that the tyranny of the heart will take its place. Because if you have no higher ideals that you're committed to, and this Rav Hirsch looks at as being the Almighty, but once again, he's not talking about Judaism yet. He's saying that your ability to choose a higher purpose is ultimate freedom because you are voluntarily immersing yourself in the highest ideal. You've chosen a higher moral value that you are going to sacrifice to, that you are going to work towards, that will make your life meaningful. And if you don't, well, then what takes its place? Rav Hirsch says, the tyranny of the heart. Embedded within yourself, you have your desires, you have your things that you want. And then if you have no external framework that you're going to exist within, what will take its place? Whatever is latent in your heart, whatever is latent in your addictive nature will take its place. Nature abhors a vacuum. So we have our first stage, being able to breathe. The second stage, where you know you're free. But the third stage here, redemption. What does redemption mean? Redemption means you have a goal. Redemption means you've committed yourself to a higher ideal that will influence the rest of your life. You're like an astronaut attached to the side of a ship, beside to your spacecraft. Yes, there may be something profoundly free about cutting yourself off in the vacuum of space. You're free now. You can float. That's terrifying. Reality is like that as well. Something will find you and take you unless you choose what to anchor yourself to. And it's not incidental. While this is being voluntarily done, at the Seder night, we voluntarily eat the maror, we eat the matzah, we eat the korban pesach, all these ideas that we are voluntarily accepting this framework on our lives. And I've had this discussion with students that they say, well, Judaism, you don't choose it. Of course you choose it. What are you talking about? You can leave tomorrow. Nobody's going to stop you. I was standing next to an Avrich when in Tel Aviv one of these students was asking me, and the Avrich looked at me shocked, like, no, you can't not be Jewish if you're Jewish. And I said to him, of course you can. You can close the book, say goodbye, and you'll be gone in a generation or two. Yes, from your standpoint, you still feel he has a chalois shame Jew. Okay, slow clap. But he doesn't care. So from his standpoint, he absolutely can drop this. By that same token, you as an individual can absolutely voluntarily accept it upon yourself. And the movement to voluntarily accept a structure of meaning, that's where that higher sense of redemption lies. But that's not it. The fourth stage, lakach li la'am. This is the Jewish specific. God choosing us as his people. This is our specific calling. The first three are universal realities, but this one is the Jewish people's connection to the Almighty. And this is where Rav Hirsch has the democratization of religion, because we have a unique connection with God. We held to that connection with God through some of the most trying, most difficult times, because the other stages are internal. The other three stages, the first cup, the second cup, the third cup, these are internal modes that held us to the fourth cup, that held us to that specific mission that we had as Jewish people. And that idea of democratization, once again, is a sort of inoculation on another tyrannical leader coming along and plucking us up. What do I mean by that? When the Jewish people left Egypt, they weren't told, go find your priest. They weren't told, go find your particular savior and go bring your Pesach korban. No, it was every Jew in their home, in a unique relationship with the Almighty. So what do we have here? We have the four stages. And in a way, every human being has these four stages. But this one is a focus on the Jewish specific calling. The first cup, the cup of being able to breathe, of drawing you away from Inoi, that suffering. The second cup, extracting you from slavery. You can now think of higher ideals. You have that basic foundation. Now you are free. As opposed to the Egyptian mentality, you are a free individual. The third cup, the cup of purpose. The cup of not, I am cut away from my spaceship, but I'm floating, but I'm free. No, not freedom like a 2-year-old. Freedom in the higher sense of the word. The sense that you have a calling and your life is meaningful. That you've voluntarily chosen a structure to put yourself within. And the Jewish people do that, or anybody can do that, by recognizing that higher structure is what we call the Almighty. The moral purpose of the world and the universe is for us to look at that and commit ourselves to that. Because when we commit ourselves to that most high ideal, it makes everything that comes, any difficulty, any struggle, meaningful in relationship to that highest ideal. And then lastly, the Jewish specific calling, the specific calling of Lokachti li la'am. That's our unique calling. That's the calling of the Jewish people. And Rav Hirsch points out that that very calling immunizes us against the tyrannies that came before. The internal frameworks of the first cup, second cup, and third cup are sort of concretized by the fourth cup. But God chose us to be his emissaries in this world. And the Jewish people's inception into that journey and that mission, there was no in between. They had that direct relationship with God. There was no priest that came to them and asked them, I'll do your Korban Pesach. They were individually commanded. Individuals in a direct relationship with the Almighty. As always, thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful week.